Good morning, everyone, and welcome to VNAR live stream with Q&A sessions on a hotter topic, NAR Lawsuit settlement. My name is Huynh, and I'm the founding president of VNAR, Vietnamese National Association of Real Estate Professional. Before I begin, please allow me a few minutes to share with you about VNAR. VNAR was founded in 2015 with a laser focus to bridge the real estate network within the Vietnamese community and to have singular voice in advocacy and to provide quality education and networking to our members. VNAR connect with real estate professional, its affiliates, and Vietnamese community nationwide. We are an organization that seeks to expand, empower, and lead by example for our community and network. Additionally, our core values are to provide educations, empowerment, build business relationship, and continue to develop more partnerships to better serve our communities and abroad. Our mission is simplified with an acronym CARES, which stands for Culture Enrichment, Advocacy, Resource Hub, Education, and Social Responsibility. VNAR now have 3 chapters: VNAR Silicon Valley, leading by Trung, VNAR Orange County, leading by Huynh, and VNAR Houston, leading by Dan King, and our incoming VNAR Southeast chapter, leading by Amy Tup. Without further ado, please allow me to introduce our 2 guest speakers today. Mr. Doan is named one of the most admired CEO by the Minneapolis and St. Paul Business Journal. Doan is the founder and the CEO of Realty Group, operates in the largest independently operated brokerage in Minnesota, and the 3rd fastest growing firm in America with over 800 real estate professionals. He is currently the VNAR National Advisory Board member. And our second speaker is Saul Klein. Mr. Saul Klein is the father of technology and internet adoptions in the residential real estate industry and generally recognized within the industry as a technology pioneer and its first internet evangelist. He was the creator of one of the first online real estate community, Real Talk, which developed for the National Association of Realtors in 1995 and still an active community. He was an original member of the first Realtor.com team, where he was driving force in the migration of listing from MLS book to the internet from atoms to bits. Saul introduced the real estate industry to the internet and email listing on the World Wide Web, online education, and listing data syndication. He is one of the few visionaries who paved the way for the real estate transition and technology. It is my honor to have you both on the live stream today. Welcome.
Thank you, Evan. Great to have Saul on. We are very lucky to have him on. He's very busy, the CEO of the San Diego MOS. He's been on probably dozens of these, wealth of knowledge to share and dispel a lot of the misinformation that is out there, right? So before we get started with a bunch of questions for him, I'd like to maybe start with some facts about this NAR settlement that is out there. You know, the facts is that this has been agreed by both sides, but are proposed and not approved yet. So everything we're talking about is not final yet, right? So we have to keep that in mind. Also, NAR would pay about $418 million approximately over the next 4 years. And this covers all of the NAR members, agents and brokerages affiliated with NAR, except for a few exceptions, Home Services of America, and any one of those brokerages that have done over $2 billion in sales volume in the year 2022. So there's some exception out there, again, subject to court approval, but if it is approved and move forward, it is supposed to go into effect mid-July, okay? Which is a pretty aggressive timeline, so a lot of the states and the local associations will have to make the adjustment. But the questions out there is, you hear on the news all the time is, buyers will no longer be compensated. Misinformation, not a fact. Love to dispel that today and answer the question. Listing brokers and sellers can't offer compensation to buyers. Also not true. Price is going to drop. Home pricing will drop. Not true. So a lot of things happening, and that's just some facts that I want to start with, Evan, and then, whatever question you have. Otherwise, I have a bunch of questions I'd like to ask Saul that I know people already pre-submitted.
Please fire away.
Well, for Saul, talk more on the biggest thing is buyers agents are all really worried because supposedly there's buy compensation going away. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, so first, it's great to be here. Thank you very much. I'm honored to have the opportunity to speak with all of you. And Long, thanks for setting this up. And Evan, you guys are amazing. And we want to make sure that we get the word out. And Long, you're absolutely right. We don't know a lot of this, but there are some things we know, and you've mentioned some of the facts, and I want to give a couple more facts that are critical, and then it'll lead to discussion around the settlement. And I also think what's important then is settlement for what? What are we settling? And then why did we even get there in the first place? So I'm actually going to work backwards from settlement to settling what to history behind it, because I believe that knowledge is power. And the more you know about this, the better you're going to be able to perform. And also know this, your clients, your customers, the people you deal with, they're hearing all about this. And so you want to be able to talk about it, and you want to be able to talk credibly about it and be informed about it. And I guarantee you a lot of your competition is going to talk about it, but they're not going to be informed about it. They're not going to be credible. And so just knowing the facts makes you more credible. It differentiates you from your competition. And real estate sales is a business of differentiation. And so two big facts that are critical to understanding this proposed, and you're right, Long, proposed settlement. Number one, the MLS will no longer function as an offer of compensation. And so a lot of people don't even know that a critical piece to the value proposition, and there's a lot more than this, but a critical piece to the value proposition that an MLS offers to people who belong to an MLS, we call those people subscribers and participants. This huge value is that it's an offer of compensation. It's an offer of compensation. And what that means practically is you only needed one contract to get compensation for two people. And so a listing agent, somebody could go out to a seller, get an agreement to list the property for sale, market the property for sale, get an agreement from the seller to pay commission, which, by the way, we always stated in California in 10-point bold type that commissions are negotiable. And we would say to the seller, sign this contract, and then I'm going to make it available. I'm going to let everybody who sells real estate in this marketplace, I'm going to let all the real estate brokers and agents know that you want to sell your property, and I'm going to share commission with those people. And so the person took the listing and put it in the MLS, and because the MLS was an offer of compensation, a unilateral, that meant nobody had to say, I accept the offer of compensation. If you belonged to the MLS, you were entitled to receive the compensation that was stated for somebody who brought in a buyer. So what that did practically is it only required one contract to lock in commission. The contract was between the seller and the listing agent. And then if you represented a buyer, you didn't have to get a contract from the buyer at the time prior to this settlement, proposed settlement. All you had to do is be a member of the MLS. And being a member of the MLS guaranteed that you were going to receive compensation. Well, what has happened is, for a number of reasons, this settlement agrees that the model of an MLS will remove the offer of compensation. Now, here's an interesting side point that's very important to understand, and that is that the National Association of Realtors doesn't have an MLS. It doesn't have an MLS, but what it has are what we refer to as model rules. And so the National Association of Realtors pretty much puts together best practices for an MLS. And if you're an association of realtors owned MLS and you agree to run your MLS by these best practices, then NAR has insurance that will cover your MLS, kind of like errors and omission insurance for MLSs. So why do we follow the rules of the National Association of Realtors when it comes to the structure of an MLS? Because we, the people who run multiple listing services, we want the protection of the insurance. So NAR, which is named in these lawsuits, doesn't have an MLS, but it has rules. And all of the association MLSs that followed the rules were subject to the possibility of being sued in these cases that I'll talk about in a minute. So first big change to be aware of is that there's no longer an offer of compensation through the MLS. That's the first thing to understand. And then the second thing you need to understand is that another requirement of the settlement is that if you're working with a buyer, prior to showing the buyer property, you have to get a signed written agreement. And that's not what we've had to do in the past. Now, a lot of, in my mind, smart buyer brokers have been doing this for a while, but many have not because the MLS didn't require it. We were able to get compensated without having a written contract. And a lot of people didn't ask for it. So there was a kind of a hurdle to get a buyer to sign it because not everybody was asking for it. But now it's going to be required that you have a buyer agreement, and that buyer agreement or buyer contract has to state how much you're going to be compensated. And so you're right, Long, you hit it, that the settlement doesn't mean that sellers can't continue to offer compensation. They can. It doesn't mean that brokers who take listings can't offer compensation. They can. What it means is that offer of compensation can't go through the MLS. So what does that mean? It's going to go outside of the MLS. And so you'll have to get a contract with the buyer. That's true. One of the things I recommend people do is start paying attention to buyer-broker contracts. You know, the National Association of Realtors is offering an ABR, which they typically charge for, course free. So you can go to if you're a realtor, you can take this ABR course for free, learn what people who've been doing this for years say that you should do to be able to get a buyer to sign a contract, and start right now to practice and learn how to deliver your value proposition to a buyer, because in this contract with a buyer, you're going to have to state how you get paid. And remember, there's 3 ways or a combination of ways to get paid. Number 1, the seller can pay you as a buyer representative. Number 2, the listing agent can pay you. Number 3, the listing agent and the seller can pay you. And number 4, the buyer can pay you. Or number 5, all of them together can pay you. So there's multiple ways to be compensated. And so when you get that buyer-broker contract signed, now typically in the early days, and you're right, and I like to tell people this, we're not going to know the best practices from this settlement after it's accepted. We're not going to know best practices for a year or two, because people are going to have to go out there and do this, and we're going to develop best practices over time, right? That's what's going to happen. So don't expect you're going to necessarily get it right the first time you do it, and that would be great. But no, you're going to learn how to exist in this new world where the MLS no longer is an offer of compensation. Compensation is still there. Now, one of the things that kind of clouds this for people is it's a seller's market. And in a seller's market, you don't need typically as much effort to have buyers brought to you, because it's a seller's market. But in a buyer's market, and remember that it's the real estate cyclical, so you have buyer's markets and seller's markets and something in between. And so in a more normal type of marketplace, a differentiator for a seller is how much commission they offer. And if I really want, and the DOJ, they don't like this idea. They call it steering. But the fact is that if you're a seller and you really want people to work their rear ends off to find buyers for you, you offer them something. You don't expect them to work for nothing, to work for free. So today you put a sign in the ground and people drive by and see the properties for sale, and it's not as hard to find buyers. But that's not always been the case, and it's not always going to be the case. So 2 very important points. 1, MLS no longer an offer compensation. Number 2, you're going to need a written contract. Number 3, you got to figure out how you're going to enter into the buyer contract, how you're going to be compensated. Now, here's the rub, and that is what, at least initially, you're probably going to say something to the buyer like, I'm going to ask for compensation. We're going to put it in the offer to purchase, which we couldn't do before, right? We had to be very careful about doing. But we're going to say, I need to be compensated. Would you agree that I need to be compensated for my work? And to be compensated for my work, I'm going to ask the seller to pay me. I'm going to ask the listing broker to pay me. However, this is the hard part. If the listing broker and the seller are not willing to pay me, I'm going to ask you to pay me, the buyer. Now, this creates all kinds of heartache because you can't finance the commission on the buy side. The buyer, although that's another story because it's already kind of built in, the buyer typically doesn't have a lot of extra money because they're trying to put everything together for a down payment and for their closing costs. Now, people that have a lot of money, they can probably do this. But underserved communities, veterans, right, where they're not allowed by the structure and nature of the loan to pay that commission, we're going to find that certain segments of the population are actually harmed by this. But I'm confident that over time, the community, right, the lenders, the real estate industry will figure out best practices and we'll be able to move forward. So those are the main points. Understand you're going to need a buyer contract. Understand you're not going to get your compensation. How am I going to know what other brokers are offering? Call them, right? Text them. If you're a listing agent, how are people going to know? The settlement doesn't preclude you from putting on your own website the fact that the seller is willing to compensate somebody who brings a buyer. And so, you're right. Well, some things haven't changed. It's just the delivery channels are changing. And so I like to say that this is a paradigm shift. We've been through paradigm shifts before. Now, a paradigm is a set of rules. That's all a paradigm is. It's a set of rules. In the United States, we have a football paradigm. In the rest of the world, if you say football, it's a different paradigm. We call it soccer, right? And so there are different sets of rules, different paradigms for just about everything. And so in real estate, we've had a certain paradigm or a method in which we do business, and you've heard this phrase, the paradigm is shifting. And so know this about a paradigm shift. When a paradigm shifts, and that's what's happening, that's a fundamental change. What we're confronting is a fundamental change in the way real estate is compensated, by the way agents and brokers are. It's a fundamental change. Know this also about fundamental changes, paradigm shifts. When a paradigm shifts, everyone goes back to zero. Everyone goes back to zero. Your past success guarantees nothing when a paradigm shifts. And you say, well, I was really good under the old rules. Well, that's great, but we're not playing under the old rules anymore. When a paradigm shifts, everyone goes back to zero. And often your past success will blind you from seeing the path to the future. And so all of those people that were successful under the old paradigm aren't necessarily going to be successful under the new paradigm, but just keep that in mind, because I think people who list and sell real estate can be successful. You're entrepreneurs of the highest caliber, of the highest degree. You know how to adopt, you know how to adapt, and that's just another change. And so to take this one step back further, why are we settling? What are we settling? And the answer is there was litigation that began about 3.5 years ago, and the litigation attacked the offer of compensation in the MLS and said the offer of compensation in the MLS is kept commissions artificially high. Now, we can all argue and say that's not true, but it doesn't matter what we think. What matters is that this first case that then grew into another case, that grew into another case, and the one that everybody is concerned with is the case in Missouri called Sitzer-Burnett. And remember, knowledge is power. And the Sitzer-Burnett case was litigation where the plaintiffs were suing the National Association of Realtors and the big name companies for antitrust. And in real estate, we're deathly afraid of antitrust, right? And so they were suing for antitrust, and there was a judgment in that case for $1.83 billion. And because it's antitrust, it's tripled. And so it was $5 billion judgment, not settlement, judgment, where the plaintiffs, National Association of Realtors, and other companies, you owe this money. Now, there were some then there was another case. Actually, it was before the one in Missouri, called Merrill, Moehlr, in Illinois. And the estimated damages, should that one have gone to trial, were like $25 to $50 billion. 25 to 50 billion. Then there was another one on the East Coast, NOSELEC, MLS PIN, the Property Information Network in the Boston, New England area. That one actually was the plaintiff and the defendant agreed to settle, and the DOJ, not even a party to this, stepped in and said, not so fast. We don't like it. Wait, you're not a party to this. That doesn't matter. They filed something called an amicus brief, and they said, we don't think the settlement benefits the plaintiffs. Wait. And then, so they waited. What happened? $5 billion settlement in Missouri, more probably in Illinois. Then what they call copycat lawsuits across the country, like 30 of these things, hundreds of billions of dollars estimated damages. So what did NAR do? It settled. You know who else settled? Keller Williams for $75 million. You know who else settled? Anywhere. I think it was for $83.5 million, much less than $1 billion, right? Who else? Remax, $55 million. Compass recently settled last week, I think, $57.5 million. So these settlements are far below what it looked like the damages were going to be. And so, and in the settlement, the National Association of Realtors negotiated and agreed to these terms, practice changes that we've already mentioned. And NAR agreed, as you mentioned, Long, to ante up $418 million. And that money is going to go into a settlement fund. And, you know, the majority of that money is going to the attorneys. That's another story. And how much do the actual plaintiffs get? I've heard anything from like $15 to $1,500. And but the thing it does for the real estate industry is it changes the way in which we look at the flow of compensation in a real estate transaction. And we're going to have to make some changes to the way we do business. And it happened before. And I will say this historically. So those are the cases. Let me give you a little bit of history. The offer of compensation that was attacked in this litigation and all these litigations, that's not always been the NAR model. Remember, NAR has a model. We follow the model because we want the insurance. The NAR model prior to 1996 was a unilateral offer of sub-agency. You might have seen the video I put up this morning online that John Riley and I did a couple years ago. The MLS prior to 1996 was a unilateral offer of sub-agency. And so prior to 1996, everybody represented the seller. Everybody represented the seller. The listing agent took the listing, they represented the seller, they put it in the MLS. All of the people who participated in the MLS became sub-agents of the listing agent, which meant they represented the seller. Everybody represented the seller. Prior to 1988, there was no agency disclosure. So this was the problem, is that everybody represented the seller, but we didn't have to tell anybody. And so here you were working with a buyer, and buyers had every right to believe you represented them in a real estate transaction prior to 1988 because you kind of looked like you did, right? They were telling you all their secrets and what they were willing to offer. But the fact is you represented the seller and you didn't have to tell the buyer. So in the mid-1980s, we had a movement to disclosure. And we had to start disclosing who we represented in real estate transactions. And that's the way we did it. We represented, we negotiated, we put all commissions are negotiable. Nonetheless, there was an issue because if you were disclosing and you didn't know how to disclose, you might check the wrong box on the agency disclosure form. Because remember, everybody represented the seller, But a lot of agents they said, well, heck, I'm not the listing agent, so I don't check the box that says I represent the seller exclusively. I'm not a dual agent, I don't think, so I don't check that box. I'm representing the buyer. So they would check the buyer, represent the buyer box. But the fact is they belong to the MLS, so they really were representing the seller. Now they've lied. They told the buyer they represented the buyer. They, in fact, represented the seller. That's a divided agency. So what had to happen? NAR had to change the model rules. And so the model rules changed in 1996, and MLS became an offer of compensation. And then we had the lawsuits, and then we had the settlement. And that's kind of a rough run through of where we are today.
Well, Professor Saul, thank you for that. For those who get this recording, you can go back and listen again to the history so you can explain it. As we know, that's how we ended up today. So let's say this proposed settlement move forward. What should we be doing moving forward, right? And you already stated a bunch of stuff. The rules going to change, and we all just need to learn how to play by it. But I can tell you right now, more than ever, our buyers will need us even more to help them navigate through one of the largest financial transactions in their lifetime, not to mention complicated, complex, emotional, and journey, right? So we just need to understand how do we disclose and explain the commission and how it's being paid. And what you said, Saul, was it used to be really simple. Now it's just a little complicated. So you have to know all the 5-6 options you always share. Everyone who's a party to the transaction can somehow be part of the compensation package, right? We're used to, as a buyer agent, I'm talking about buyer agents right now, we used to just say, don't worry, I'll show you the home. You don't have to pay me. Many agents explain that incorrectly. What they meant is not out of pocket because it's paid, right? It's just included in the sales price because the seller already built that in. Now, if I was a seller, this is why this happened. I'm paying the buyer agent to negotiate against me in my commission I agreed to pay, right? So now just decouple. So I think it's important, like you said, Saul, as this move forward, we just need to learn how to explain and do a better job, which again, I'm telling you guys, NAR gets a lot of good resources, including the fact sheet or the Q&A on NAR, there, facts.realtor. You can go there. That's where I got a lot of my information. But I will tell you this, it has this 105 ways we help buyers. It's great on there if you don't know it. I can share it on our group too, Evan. 179 things we do for sellers to show the values of us as a real estate professional. That's one thing we've done poorly. We haven't done a good job of explaining the value. I'm sorry, don't get me going about the attorney, beating us up on 2 to 3% commission when they're getting 30 to 33% of a lawsuit when they get the job done, right? The other thing too, as a buyer agent, we just need to change is when you go to a listing and the seller said, yes, I agree to all your term, we negotiated, go ahead and list my home. You don't leave and then do staging if you need to, do photography, spend money in marketing, put the sign out if you didn't have a listing contract, correct? Many of the buyer agents have gone to show homes without a buyer contract, 10, 15 homes, and they might say, oh, sorry, I'm using my cousin instead, right? I mean, this will force us to have them sign it. So you're right, Saul. This is, until it's official, I see it's a good thing. This is our opportunity to step up as real estate professionals, to do a better job of explaining our values. So here's something I want to recommend and run by you guys. It's a mindset. Everything's mindset, right? Because things change all the time. That's a constant. It's inevitable that we'll have change, and we're changing. Not just small change, but big change, paradigm. So maybe you start explaining things like was a service, use the word service instead of sales. Use the word compensation instead of commission. There's certain things we need to understand how to explain to the buyers, right? Like Minnesota, like California, one of the many states, already had buyers compensation and rep in our docs, in our forms. We just have to do a better job of changing our behavior, how to explain it. So, Evan, you have any question from crew besides Saul? You want to touch on something? Sorry.
Yeah, I want to throw something in here. So here's what you need to do to practice real estate in the future. You need to learn how to convince people of your value. So what's your value proposition? What's your value proposition? So I'm going to give you some ideas around creating your value proposition. And so what I've always said about real estate is there's a cycle, and this is how it works. They all end in ATE. You help locate property. But you begin by educating. So you educate the buyer. You then locate the property. You then negotiate the transaction. You then administrate the closing, and then you continue to communicate. So just know this, that there are these 5 phases of a real estate transaction: educate, locate, negotiate, administrate, communicate. And what I recommend you do is go back to your files and pull out your last 5 to 10 transactions. Now, I'm an old-fashioned kind of guy. Take a piece of paper for each one of those 5. Educate, locate, negotiate, administrate, communicate. Piece of paper for each one, and then go through your files and write down on each piece of paper what you did in each one of those transactions, no matter how small. Don't leave anything out. Just start to list all those things. And when you're done, you will have created your menu of services. Now, you can then charge for your menu of services any way you like. You're going to see some people charge by the service. You're going to see some people charge flat fee. You're going to see some people charge one size fits all. You hire me, you get it all. So different compensation models, but the key is being able to make your point about your value proposition. I always ask this question: why would you hire you? That's the critical piece. And then create your menu of services. And then remember this about what I call the driving forces, what consumers are looking for, and integrate these into your presentation. Consumers want, besides the contracts long, you meant the contract's complex. It's a complex transaction. It's like 10, 20, 30 pages long. There's all these disclosures. So why would you hire you? Create your menu of services, and then think about and integrate wherever possible the driving forces of consumers. Here they are. Speed. People want speed. How do you help them do what they want to do faster? People actually pay more money if you help them do things faster. People want convenience. What do you do to make this more convenient for people? People will pay more money for convenience. People want choice. Well, maybe you offer different ways to be compensated. People want choice. People want value added. Now, realtors, you don't have to do all of them, but which of those can you integrate into your presentation to make your value proposition? Why would you hire you if you were looking to buy and find a piece of property? Know the contracts. There's all kinds of expertise that's required in understanding the contracts to purchase a piece of real estate. And one thing people don't talk about, but we all recognize it, is what I don't list and sell real estate anymore. I'm 75 years old, but I did. And when I did, I had errors and omission insurance. And we don't want to go out and market the fact that we have errors and omission insurance, but you know what? That's a benefit to sellers. And that's a benefit to buyers, the fact that I have that errors and omission insurance. As a matter of fact, one of the things listing agents should be doing is educating sellers on why it's important to pay a buyer broker. And so part of your listing, on the listing side, part of your presentation should be all the reasons you believe it's important that a buyer is represented in a real estate transaction, and tell the seller that your people are going to ask that you compensate, and it's in your best interest as a seller to make sure that the buyer's agent is compensated for the job that they do.
Yep. You're totally right, Saul. It's us as opportunities as professionals to step up and do a better job, right? And I'll tell you, all the listeners on this right now or watch recording later, the fact that you're on listening or watch later, I mean, you're serious about real estate and you want to stay in it, because guess what? Owning a home is American dream. And it's up to us as real estate professionals. It's our responsibility to keep the dream alive and help them become a reality, right? So the fact you're listening, you want to do better. So the one who are not listening or not even care about it, I talk to agents who don't even know what's going on, which is very scary. So, I think this is going to help also improve our industry, because those who are serious about being in this industry will need to step up, educate, come up with a way to show value, like you said, Saul. And for those who are not, we'll go back to doing whatever they're doing. So I'm excited. It's a paradigm shift. Anytime there's a change, I feel like I have an opportunity to be ahead of my competition because I'm gonna start earlier and sooner by listening to people are sharing like you and Evan here. So Evan, what question do you have in the chat group, if any?
One question here that I want to kick you guys off is that with the commissions now, can the brokerages or agents promote commissions on social media platform now? Let's just say compensations, buyer agent compensation. Can they advertise that on social media platforms?
Saul, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, so, and then I'll let you take it along. So yes, remember what this does is it stops the MLS from being an offer of compensation. We have to remove from the MLS the offer of compensation. Matter of fact, we have to remove what we refer to as the CBB, right? Commission to buyer broker. We have to remove that field from the MLS. We can indicate in no field in the MLS that there's a commission offered by the seller. But agent and here it is, right? It's 108 pages long, right? And in here, it actually says that on your own website, and I would take as an extension of that, as long as it's not in the MLS, you can indicate that in social media. Now, here's one of the things that's part of this whole conversation, and we're going to have to work our way around it, is something called steering. Not steering in the fair housing sense, but steering. The Department of Justice and actually believes that realtors choose properties they're going to show based on the compensation that they receive. And so if in fact that were true, then only the properties that offer the highest commissions get sold. And part of this settlement is you have to show anything regardless. Well, that's kind of stupid, because if people offer zero, why would you? Who's forced to work for free? And yet, that's kind of what this is trying to do by saying that you can't steer based on compensation. You have this fiduciary. You have to show people everything. Well, I'm going to take that to its radical extreme. Does that mean you have to show FSBOs? Because they don't offer anything either. And have people thought about this? And I'm going to take this to another point. Now, don't do this until your attorneys and your brokers approve this, right? Because I'm just thinking outside the box a little bit. But that is, what if the buyer said, you explain everything to the buyer, and the buyer says, and you say, but it makes sense that I get paid. Would you agree with that? Well, yeah, I agree with that. Well, then, if I show you properties where I don't get paid and you're not willing to pay me, how am I going to get paid? Maybe you hire me to show properties where the seller is willing to compensate me. And so maybe that buyer agreement, and again, I'm not recommending, I'm just saying this gives you all kinds of ideas, right? Maybe a buyer agreement in the future would say if the seller's not willing to offer compensation, you can't force an agent to take you out to show you something where they're not compensated. Maybe if you presented it that way, the buyer would say, hey, you know what, I'll pay you. But maybe in that buyer agreement, it says that you're only going to show properties where there's some kind of guarantee that you're going to get paid. So anyway, that's kind of an off the cuff.
Yeah. Well, Saul, but what you touched on is important because it's supply and demand, right? At the end of the day, it's an open market. So it depends on which side you're going to be representing in the transaction. If I was working with a seller, I would explain what the new rule change. You don't have to offer a commission to the buy side. You have the right to do that. But I also want you to understand, if you don't offer it, the buyers may not have the ability to pay it, and they may not look at your home. They may look at 123 Main Street down the road that is offering. I show you right now. It's it's not on MOF, but I can tell from the brokerage website that's they offer 2.5% or 3%. Just want you to be aware of it. Also, if you don't, when the buyer submit an offer, they may include requests for buy compensation to be paid as part of the negotiation so they can buy your home. I see that on the listing side. On the buy side, you said it, Saul. Okay, here's my compensation. Before I even show you a home, I can't even show you a home unless you sign this thing. So let's agree to this. So one thing I do like is what it changes. Buyer agent been riding the coattail of listing agent in the past. Because listing agent would negotiate a commission already, right? And buy like, okay, I'm getting 2.7 if I sell this house. Well, now you have to show your value. But let's say you did show your value and you let them know, and you said it, Saul. Many people will tell me the parameter of searching a home and a buy, right? I want to live in this area. Of course, no steering and no redlining or blockbusting, whatever. I want to live in this area. Well, this will be very the same. Part of the parameter is I want to look for only the one that offer compensation to the buy agent. So I don't have to come up with it because you always said it. The veteran, first-time home buyer, underserved community can barely come up with a down payment. Now they have to come up with the commission to pay the buyer agent. That's going to be very difficult, right? So it's all in how you explain and show value and let them know. And then fiduciary duties, here's all the listings out there of up to 10 that matches your other parameter. Only 6 of these also pay commission to me. Okay, so will you be able to come up with the rest, or we can make an offer and add that in as a request and see what happens? So I think supply and demand, the open market will eventually even it out. You just need to learn the new rules, as you said, the new paradigm, how to address this.
You're listening to a guy who took from the MLS book to the World Wide Web. That's how far we go back in shifting the paradigm. And just want to kind of add on to that. I think it varies in different markets too, don't you guys think? I'm in Silicon Valley market. It's definitely a seller market for the past, 5 years. So seller now maybe will thinking about, not paying the buyer agent commissions, because now the buyer agent have to negotiate for themselves because their listing is hot. You can put the sign, the house is sold. In all the different market area might be a little softer, where they still have to offer compensations as a bonus to bring in the buyer agent more offers. What do you guys think about that? Where do you see now, Sal, at that market area that would affect the most in this new change?
Well, so you're absolutely right. Again, it's economic market driven as well as location driven. And you're going to see people, because the consuming public's hearing so much about this. You're going to see sellers, and you're probably going to see commissions in many cases go down. You're going to see more dual agency, because in a hot market, in a seller's market, in a desirable area where there's a low inventory, a seller might say, no, I'm not willing to pay somebody to negotiate against me. Well, obviously they think that, they don't really understand, but I'm not willing to pay somebody. I think that if I give you the listing, you should be able to go do a little bit of marketing and you should be able to sell this property. Now, some people that don't have the money or don't want to pay a buyer broker might think that the easiest way to buy the house is to go directly to the listing agent. Go directly to the seller through the listing agent. So you might see more people doing that. And then what you end up with dual agency. So you need to be able to talk about dual agency. So initially, I think you're probably going to see that happen. You're going to see people that think the only way to do this is to go through the listing agent. Now, some people, well, the listing agent's going to then charge twice as much. I don't think that's necessarily the case, because people are going to compete. They're going to charge different amounts of commission. So you'll have to deal with that in your market. If you're in a market, a desirable market right now, right, particularly since everybody is hearing this press about how bad the real estate agents are, and the fact that they overcharge, and the fact that, right, I mean, this is all they're hearing. They're reading all this stuff. So you're going to have people that want to do this and want to try it on their own, and or don't want to have an agent for one reason or that means no agent really made their value proposition very clear to those people. And now you've got the agent on the listing side that ends up having to take more liability. How are they going to explain that to the seller and to the buyer that comes in? Now, here's a thought. Open house. How do you treat open? Now, remember, you can't show a property till you have a written agreement, because remember, this document, as thick as it is, doesn't name all of the circumstances and situations. So I'm sitting in open, I got a listing, I'm sitting in an open house, buyer comes in, I can't show them the house. I don't have a written agreement with the buyer. How am I going to show them my open house if they're an unescorted buyer? Well, maybe they'll create a new form that's an open house buyer agreement form, right? I mean, it's like all this stuff is yet to be invented on how we're going to practice the sale of real estate under this new settlement agreement.
All right, gentlemen, I'd like to shift this over to answering some questions from our audience.
We saw one on there about if home prices will reduce because of this, right? Again, another misinformation. Okay, if I was the seller and I said I don't have to pay out 2.5 or 3% commission, you think I'm going to take 2.5 to 3% less of what I can get for my home price? Come on, people. Saul, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that's nuts to think that the home prices are going to come down in this market in particular, where there's not enough inventory, where people are actually offering more than the listed price, where people still waive inspections. To think that a seller would think in their mind that because they're not paying a commission, they should lower the price. Now, that doesn't mean that people can't make this. Something like this will happen where an agent presents an offer and it says, "Well, I offer $500,000 to buy this house," and the seller says, the seller, you have to pay the agent commission. That could be countered. I think the counter would be more like, "No, I'll accept the 500,000, but I'm not paying the commission." In which case, the buyer ends up paying the commission, or the seller says, "Okay, I'll pay the commission, but instead of 500,000, I want 545,000." Right? Right. So you're going to see this kind of negotiation go back and forth. But to think that home prices are going to go down is a myth. It's a misconception. It's a misunderstanding of human nature, and it's not going to happen.
Right. So the other question that I hear often as well is, because the rule's still changing, right? It's not set yet. We're still waiting for the approval. But that's one thing about America is people will make the adjustment, make the changes. You are probably going to see lenders making the adjustment as well in their lending program if necessary, right? Because they want to get more people into the home. Again, the value of the buy commission has always been financed in, because it's built into the purchase price, right? So if it's decoupled now, how would that be treated? I think they'll make the adjustments. Maybe the term seller concessions will be redefined to possibly include the commissions paid to the agent. So I think we're going to see a lot of stuff more to come. But what I can say is all about the mindset. Stay calm, stay informed, go to places like NAR, who, with the settlement, has protected you from being sued yourself. They have a lot of resources that we can tap into, including, like I said, 105 different ways to show your value to the buyer, 179 different ways to show your value to the seller. Start being informed and stay calm. And then be out there, reaching out to your database right now. This is a good time, a good excuse to reach out. Hey, you guys heard all the crazy thing out there, right? Any question, let me know. I'm still here to help you. Matter of fact, I'm informed. I know what's going on. Call me. Because on an average, everyone knows 12 to 15 real estate agents. A long-lost cousin, the guy they graduated with, but they're not informed, right? They're not active like you are. So I see this as an opportunity, Evan.
So, Long, you make a good point. Here's what I think about lenders. Lenders make money when they loan. Because there's a settlement or a change in the way commissions are paid, do you think lenders are going to not want to make money? You think lenders are not going to want to make loans? Now, those loans are typically sold in the secondary market by Fannie and Freddie, Fannie Mae, Federal National Mortgage Association, and Freddie Mac, right, that buy loans, conforming loans, non-conforming loans. They package those up and they create things called mortgage-backed securities that they sell to pension funds. You think that the secondary market isn't still going to want to buy loans? You think the secondary market isn't going to want to package loans and sell them? So remember, we're not going to know best practices for a year or two, but I guarantee you that whatever adjustments have to be made by the financial side of this market will be made. Loans will continue to be made. Property will continue to be bought and sold. And so I'm not worried about the lenders. They all want to make money too.
Totally agree. Right. So, Evan, I have a question, and we have a few more minutes. I'd love to hear both of your thoughts, obviously, because you all lead other people as well. What should a real estate agent who's like really scared about this be doing to be prepared for whatever this change is coming when it comes to mindset, logistic, practice, whatever? I'd like to hear from you guys. Evan, will you maybe share some?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been talking about this for the last 4 or 5 months now, using the buyer agreement. And we now just more than ever train our agents to learn how to talk about negotiate for themselves, talk about their services and their value. So you touched on that earlier, Sal. Agents now have to equip themselves with more negotiation skill, know how to sell themselves better, represent their client to understand, so the client can understand the value where they're coming from. And again, it's a still, someone has to pay the compensation. It's just a matter of how we're delivering the message now going forward. So at Keller Williams, our team, TE Real Estate Group, we have a team of 13 agents. We're training ourselves how to become a better negotiator and start equipping ourselves with more knowledge that we can show value to our clients.
Yeah, and I would say take the ABR course. It's free. You can take it on the net. Go to NAR.Realtor, the National Association of Realtors site. ABR, Accredited Buyer Representative. It's free till the end of the year. And they're going to teach you things you need to know to be able to convince a buyer that it's in the buyer's best interest to sign that agreement. And one other thing is so negotiation is a key point. Learn how to negotiate, spend time learning how to be a better negotiator, because that's a critical thing that you bring to the transaction is negotiation skills. And then another thing that is of great importance that you bring to the table is you bring a fiduciary duty. And so people don't understand what a fiduciary duty is. But the agency disclosure laws in most states give you the opening. They give you the opportunity to explain to buyers exactly what it means to have a fiduciary and how valuable it is to have a fiduciary. And so as part of the agency disclosure, as you disclose what a fiduciary is, why it's valuable, you educate. Remember, we talked about educate, locate, negotiate, administrate, communicate. As you educate, use the agency disclosure form in your state to teach people about the value of having a fiduciary. And that leads you right into the conversation around asking, and you know how you can hire me to be your fiduciary? We use a contract. And we can make that contract for 1 day, for 1 hour, for one property. And I can't show you property until you sign this contract. But what you get is you get my utmost good faith, my loyalty, my fiduciary duty to do the very best to place your interests above my interest. So understand fiduciary relationships, know how to explain it, use agency disclosure laws to shoehorn you into the conversation around signing a buyer-broker agreement.
And I think I know we're coming to the end here, Evan. So one last thing I'd like to say is go to the trusted source, your broker, your team leader, your state association or NAR, and get the facts so you can be educated. And then you can, talk to the end consumer, because the big elephant's in the room. They're all going to talk about right now. It's not effective yet until July if this thing get approved, right? But they're already asking you the question. Everything you hear here should help you with that. And then the other thing is the mindset. It's going to happen. Something's going to change, but we're going to make the adjustment. For all of those out there who want to stay in there and be part of the American dream here, journey, we're all going to make adjustments. And all you listeners out there, just the fact that you're listening and want to learn more, you will do just fine. That's how I feel.
Well, that's a great way to close this up, Long. And thank you so much, Sal, Long, for your valuable time and everything that these two gentlemen have mentioned. The link, I will post it on our Facebook page. Please follow us on Facebook, VNARP / I think Silicon Valley for now. The ABR course that Sal has mentioned, the link also copy in the chat room. Also, NAR released a full page of all the facts that you can copy and paste and share that with your client. I will also drop that in the description as well. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. And I think it has been a very informative live seminar. And I hope we can bring you back in the later future for further update. Thank you so much.